Okay, so have you ever wondered, like, what would happen if we actually put the people most impacted by climate change in the driver's seat?
Hmm. I like where you're going with this.
Right, because that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Oh, interesting.
We're talking about the book Climate Sisters, Resisting Ecocide by Seenarine.
Okay.
It's all about, this incredible movement of young women, many from the global south, who are literally staring down the climate crisis.
And what struck you about their stories?
Their strength,
Hmm.
It's really something. This book, it doesn't just talk about climate change, it makes you feel the urgency.
It's true. We're
Yeah.
talking about a world that's already warmed by 1.3 degrees Celsius, and by the end of the century, places like Sudan could be looking at a 5.1 degree increase. Those numbers are just exactly. And you know what's even more alarming? These aren't just numbers on a page. They represent a very real cascade of challenges, like way more extreme weather events.
And dwindling resources,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which makes you realize this isn't some distant threat. This is about the here and now.
It is, and it's about the people living through it every single day.
And a lot of those people, the ones leading the charge, they're young women.
That's right.
So the question is, what's driving this surge in female leadership?
Well, women and girls, particularly in marginalized communities, they often bear the brunt of climate change.
Because they're the ones on the ground.
Exactly. Think about it. They're the ones responsible for, like, securing food and water, resources that become way more scarce when droughts hit.
And when things go sideways, who's picking up the pieces?
Often, it's the women. They're the caretakers.
So it's bigger than just saving the planet.
Way bigger.
It's about justice.
Yes,
It's about making sure everyone has a fair shot.
absolutely.
And that's precisely what these climate sisters, as the book calls them, are fighting for.
Right on. It's kind of amazing, actually. These women are, like, rewriting the book on what climate leadership looks like.
Right.
I-
That they're not waiting around for, someone to give them permission.
Exactly. They're not relying on those traditional power structures. They're stepping up and saying, we've got this.
And the range of backgrounds is just incredible. Scientists, poets, journalists, like you name it. It's like this global tapestry of activism, all united by this shared purpose.
I know. And I think that's what makes this book so powerful. Every profile, it's like this masterclass in courage and resilience.
Okay, so you gotta give me an example. Tell me about one of these climate sisters whose story blew you away.
Oh, there are so many. But the one that comes to mind, I think, is Nisreen Elsaim.
Okay, tell me about her.
So she's this incredible physicist from Sudan. And get this, at just 26 years old, she's addressing world leaders at COP26,
Oh, hold on. COP26, that's the
the UN Climate Change Conference. Yeah,
where, they're trying to hammer out these global climate agreements, high stakes.
exactly. And she doesn't hold back. She's like right there, challenging these powerful people, urging them to choose the right side of this battle.
Wow.
Her directness, her refusal to, like, sugarcoat things, it was really inspiring to see.
It makes you think, though, right? Like, what does it mean for us to choose the right side?
It's such a good question. And for Nisreen, it's not theoretical. It's deeply personal. Sudan is already facing some of the worst impacts of climate change.
And she's living it.
Yes. And what's amazing is she's not pleading for help. She's demanding action. She's like, we're not just victims here, we're leaders.
And it's not just about speaking truth to power. It's about, like, using your voice creatively, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I love about Denise Fazenda's story. She's from Mozambique.
Okay.
And she's this incredible poet and activist who combines those two things to take on this intersection of climate change and gender-based violence.
Whoa. So how does that work? Poetry is activism.
It's amazing. She calls it artivism. And basically, she gets how climate change, it doesn't just create new problems, it makes existing ones way worse.
Because it hits the most vulnerable the hardest.
Yes. In many parts of the world, when you have droughts, floods, whatever, it's women who are disproportionately impacted.
Because they have fewer resources to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And less access to things like education and healthcare. So they're starting from behind. And then climate change just exacerbates everything.
So Denise's poetry, it shines a light on all of that.
It does. It connects climate change to gender inequality, social justice, all of it. It's a way to make people feel the urgency, in a different way.
And hopefully inspire them to act.
That's the goal.
And it's a good reminder that activism can start at any age, right? Because Brianna Fruean from Samoa, she's been a voice for her island nation since she was like 11 years old.
11. I know, it's amazing. She really challenges this idea that you have to wait for permission or a platform or whatever. You can start making a difference right now, wherever you are.
Right. And speaking of making a difference, I was so drawn to Kari Fulton's story.
Oh, me too. Her work is incredible.
Right. She's from the U.S., and she's all about connecting environmental justice with social justice, especially for communities of color.
Yes. Because, let's be real, environmental damage. It doesn't hit everyone equally.
No, not all.
Marginalized communities, they often bear the brunt of it.
And that's what she's fighting to change. She has this one quote that really stayed with me. She says, "If you breathe this air, you are an environmentalist."
It's so true.
Right. It reminds you that this isn't some side issue. It affects literally everyone.
And it highlights how important inclusivity is within the environmental movement itself. We need everyone at the table.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we've talked about scientists, poets, activists. Now we have to talk about journalists, because Yessenia Funes, a Salvadoran American journalist, she just gets it.
She really does.
She's not afraid to ask the tough questions, even within the environmental movement, to make sure we're getting it right.
It's so important.
Like, how do we make sure the transition to clean energy doesn't just swap out one form of inequality for another, you know?
Exactly. She's not afraid to point out the potential downsides of, like, even well-intentioned policies.
Like, we can't just focus on the what. We have to think about the how, you know?
100%. And I think what ties all these climate sisters together, even with their different backgrounds and approaches, is this understanding that it's all connected.
Right, like climate change doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Exactly. They get that. They're bridging this gap between, like, the science and the real-life experiences of people on the ground.
And reminding us that climate change isn't just an environmental issue.
Right. It's a human rights issue.
A social justice issue.
An economic issue. It's all intertwined.
Totally. And they're showing us that you don't need to wait for some official invitation to lead.
You really don't. They're like, come on, let's go. We can do this.
And that brings us back to the book's title, right? Resisting Ecocide. What does that even mean for us, like in our everyday lives?
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, it could be a lot of things. Maybe it's taking a hard look at our own consumption habits, or pushing for policy changes in our communities.
Well, maybe it's supporting those organizations that are already doing the work, you know?
Yeah.
Donating our time or money.
Exactly. The point is, it's about action, in whatever way feels right for you.
Because even small things, when enough people do them, they add up, right?
They really do. It creates this ripple effect. And it's also about using our voices to amplify the voices of those who are hit hardest by climate change.
The ones who are often left out of the conversation.
Exactly.
So for anyone listening who's feeling like overwhelmed or like they don't know where to start, what would you say to them?
I'd say read this book.
Yeah.
Let these climate sisters be your inspiration. Let their stories remind you that you have the power to make a difference.
Love that. So to wrap things up, Climate Sisters. Resisting Ecocide by seenarine. Pick it up, dive in, and let's get to work.